All right, welcome back, everybody. Another story, another narrative. I absolutely love doing these kinds of things because I get to see and hear about the behind the scenes and some of the stuff that we don't normally find out because our social media often we're trying to get one message out. But this is so fun. This is it's so exciting. So I actually met Star and I was a guest on her podcast, and that was great and a lot of fun. And I know you've got a really strong YouTube channel and Instagram, and we'll talk about that. So I recommend going over there. There's a shout out for your channels as well. But the thing that I loved about that was the fact that we had some real conversations on your podcast, and so I'm like, man, this is a perfect fit for what we're doing and being able to tell the real stories of what's going on behind the scenes, because so often people look at individuals and they're like, oh, their life is perfect and they've got it all together and everything. And you and I had a really deep conversation. I'm like, yeah, we need to talk about this. We need to get into this because it's hard. I mean, like, it is sometimes super hard when we look at other people and then we start to compare ourselves, and then we don't realize how much hard knock they had to get to where they are. And like, we just need to have these conversations. So I'm thankful. Thank you for actually taking the time out of your day to be able to spend with us and to do the recording. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And as I told you before, I love the narrative. It's raw. I'm so serious.
It
Like
is.
I said, oh, I'm gonna have to keep binging a lot of this content because this is what the world is craving. They're so
Yep.
tired of the polished, everything's doing great. Life is always great for me. No, we want to hear the real, but then also see the success so that I know for me, it motivated me to let me know, okay, it's not always going to be a valley season, as in like it's not always going to be hard. Things will get better. So I
Yeah.
love it. So thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
Well, okay. We're going to go down a slight rabbit hole and then we'll come right back to where we normally do, right? So, I mean, I've been consuming a lot of information, a lot of different, just trying to grasp the media trends and seeing what's happening and what's going on. And the interesting note is there's a massive shift away from national media
Mhm.
to different podcasts and individuals. And people like Joe Rogan, I mean, these guys are number one, two,
Mhm.
three, and they've got millions of people. And the bottom line is this: people are hungry for real. People
Yes.
are hungry for authentic. They don't want this fake people reading through and that's what we're going to do. And that's what makes this thing so much fun. All right. Let's get started on what the purpose of today, what we're trying to do. So let's start with this question as we do with everybody. Who is Star? We meet in an elevator. You got 60 seconds. Who are you?
This is such a good question. I used to struggle with this, but I am a woman. I'm a leader. I love people. I love God. That's who I am at the core. And then I'm a TV producer and a marketing coach. And I love to help business owners really expand their brand on social media because we all are called to have an impact.
Mm.
Oftentimes, we just don't know how to release that so that we can reach a lot of people. And so that's what I'm called to do. But who I am at the core, woman, leader who loves people, who loves God.
Mm. I love that, and I love that it's really a focus on the identity too, and that it's at your core, like what you're talking about there. Because too often we actually pull our identity from our jobs or from something else that's not necessarily who we are. So
Yep.
I love that answer. All right, so as we kind of jump into the history of your life, and I
Mhm.
almost feel like I have to get somber for a second. I don't know why. I just got struck with that. It's just like, oh, now we're gonna get deep, and no. I mean, like, I don't know. Anyway, all right. We'll go back here. So I mean, realistically, though, what were the beliefs that you had formed before you stepped into this, what we would call your adult life or the life that you're currently living? What were the beliefs that you thought my life is always going to be like this?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
could have been spoken, could have been inferred, it could have been circumstantial, it could have been whatever. But what was that core belief? Like, this is the way it's going to be.
Yeah. So I'm going to share this belief, but know that when I was younger, I didn't know this was the belief.
Mm,
I'm only just now discovering it now as I started my business and trauma started to come up. So this was the belief that I had, which was it doesn't matter how hard I work or how long I wait, I'm not going to get what I want.
mm,
Right. And so I'll share some experiences when I was a kid on why it started to develop. But I had a father where I would ask him for certain things and he would say, yes, you just have to wait. So now here I am, I'm waiting months. And then by the time he gets back to me to give me this gift or whatever it is that I ask for, I can't use it.
mm.
So one example was asking him for a bike. I was young. I probably could have been 10 years old. So, a 10-year-old is either using training wheels or just using the two-wheeler, but the smaller bikes, right? I waited months for this bike. I couldn't wait to get it. And when he finally gave it to me, this bike was for a grown man. I
Mm.
mean, like a 30-year-old man. Like, it was so grown that I had to give it to my uncle. That's how big it
Oh,
was. And I was so disappointed, right? But I didn't realize that I was disappointed until my adult years now. I want to say 5 years ago, when God called me to quit my job, right? I can hear him telling me, like, oh, quit your job. I was a TV producer, worked in television for so long, was happy to be a television producer, but this fear kept coming over me. And so when God said, quit your job, I didn't want to do it, but I ended up doing it. And I remember asking God this question: how do I know that it's going to be worth it?
mm.
How do I know that following you would be worth it? I didn't know where that question was coming from, but there was a lot of tears. There was a lot of fear. And I asked him that question maybe for about 2 to 3 years. And it's only in this season, and really it started last year, that I started to understand the reason why I was asking God that question is because of this belief that doesn't matter how long I wait, doesn't matter how hard I work, I'm not going to get what I want. And it started there.
So
Because,
let's back that up, because there's a lot to unpack here.
yeah,
And I think it's really important. It's not something that somebody said to you that created that belief. It was the circumstantial situations and the experiences that you created and deduced
yes.
this is the way that my life is going to be, right? So the interesting fact of our lives is when we create that belief, or we start to form that belief, we start to look for things to reinforce whatever it is that we believe. So let's go back into that childhood. You said about 10, but going through those time frames, how often did you find things that reinforced this? It doesn't matter how hard I work, I'm going to be disappointed.
Yep. So quite often, actually, because then there were other times that I would ask my father for things and he would say to wait, and I would wait. And every time he gave it to me, it would be so disappointed. I would be so disappointed. Now, my father passed away when I was 17, but I remember before he died, I wanted a phone because I was 16 and I'm
Yeah.
like, it's time for me to have a phone. And when I asked for it, he said I had to wait. And I remember throwing a fit. And in my mind, I don't know why I'm throwing a fit. He's looking at me like I'm a brat, but I'm like, no, I want this now. Now that I'm older and I can reassess it, I'm like, oh, that's why I threw a fit. I didn't trust him.
Yeah.
But not only that, I started to go through
Wait,
life.
wait. Because you said something really, really important here.
Yeah.
So the result of this belief is the lack of trust in those that have authority or those that are in your leadership. So, like, that's a big, big thing right there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Because and actually because of that, to this day, I'm very big on you have to have integrity to be in my inner circle. Like,
Mm.
if you don't have integrity, if you don't do what you say you're going to do in the time frame that you say you're going to do it, then I don't want to be your friend. I don't want to work with you or nothing like that. It really gets me. But it's not just that, right? Because then I started to see it reinforced through life.
Mm.
In my life growing up, I just kept hearing, if you go to school, get good grades, go to college, you'll be able to get the job that you want, you'll be able to live the life that you want, you'll be able to get paid more money. So I am now. I'm doing all the right things. I go to college, I graduate with honors. Every year I'm in an honor society. And I remember graduating and couldn't get a job. I couldn't
Mm.
even get into grad school. It took 11 months for me to finally get a job. And when I did get that job, I was the intern to the executive assistant of a CEO for a nonprofit. I
Mm.
know that probably went over everyone's head, but just know that I was the intern working with other high schoolers, making the same amount of money, even though I graduated from college.
Mm.
So that was devastating to me. But I remember before getting this job, I was sitting at home and I was looking at all my awards on the wall. All my awards was telling me, you did great, you graduated with honors, you magna cum laude, you're on the dean's list. And I felt like they were mocking me. They
Mm.
were laughing at me. They were telling me, you did everything that life told you to, and you can't get a job. And when you finally did get a job, it did not pay enough. You had to fight, scream, scratch for it, and you're at the same level of a high schooler. I got so angry, I knocked all the awards down. I remember just tearing it all down. And they're probably either in the garbage or someplace hidden.
Mm.
But that now told me that it doesn't matter how hard I work, I'm not going to get what I want. So it reinforced it. So
Mm.
now I have the example from my father and then the example from life.
So let me ask you how this impacted your self-worth. Because
Mm,
I think there's a lot of impact that's going on. One is you mentioned about the impact of the lack of trust with other individuals, like you said.
mhm,
And
mhm.
then the second thing, though, is how did that impact how you viewed your own value and how that impacted your self confidence.
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm happy we're having this conversation now that I'm 37. If I was 22, if I was 22, I would have been like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm fine. But no, I was actually depressed. I fell into a depression at the age of 15, and I went through life like a zombie all the way to the age of 27. I felt like that I couldn't be loved. I felt like I couldn't negotiate for the salaries that I wanted. I didn't even understand why companies wouldn't even give me the salary that I wanted, even though I didn't ask for it. Right. And I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself. Although people around me would have thought I was so confident because I'm a socialite, I can talk to anyone, make friends anywhere. But on the inside, I felt like I didn't really know myself. And I
Mm.
felt like, what is the word? I just keep using the word zombie because that's how I felt. I just felt like I was going through life doing the things, but nothing actually really mattered.
So you were not, and this is an interesting thing, and maybe I'm hitting on something. You can tell me I'm way off track, and we'll come back. Then that's fine. But you felt that you weren't able to be of value, number one, to yourself internally, right? That's the first step. But then the second part of it is you're not offering any value to anybody that's around you, or being able to offer any value, because everybody's looking at you like, well, you got all these awards, and you're just like saying, so what? Literally,
Exactly.
so what? I can't actually make,
Mhm.
and you mentioned this early on, you can't make an impact. You
Yeah.
have no ability to be able to impact anybody else or influence anybody else. Good, wrong, different, bad, ugly, what, it doesn't matter. You can't impact anybody because you don't have that area. So all of these things are kind of all coming together. And I'm really curious because, okay, we just summarize. It doesn't matter how hard you work, you're not going to get what you want, basically.
Mhm, mhm.
Leads to a lot of distrust, leads to a lot of depression, anxiety,
Yeah.
lack of self value, lack of self worth. The confidence is just not there. What woke you up? What smacked you in the head and said, okay, this is just not how life is going to be, or this is not how life is? And then I know just from personal experience, it's a long process, but what was the beginning stage to be able to like wake up and say, how are we going to live life differently?
I'm happy you asked what was the beginning stage because the beginning stage started at 27 when depression broke off of me.
Hmm.
And I share what I mean by that. It's just I was part of this organization, and in it they do inner healing. At the time, I didn't know that was the language for it. All I knew that we were doing workshops and they were having us talk. So the more I talked, the more I started to see myself. And I remember them doing this exercise where we all we were in a room, of course, but we had to imagine that we were on a boat and the boat was going down. And you had a choice to make. Do you join the raft with 10 people so you can go and get help like elsewhere? Or do you go down with the boat? And I remember choosing to go down with the boat. And in that moment, it didn't matter to me because I felt like, what's the point of living anyway?
Hmm.
Again, I had depression. But I remember in that moment, I can hear God speaking. And some people are probably wondering, like, how do you hear God speak? There's many different ways to hear him speak, but in that moment, I could hear it was like a whisper in my ear that said, choose to live and live passionately. And I remember crying my eyes out and thinking to myself, choose? You mean to tell me I am choosing to live a life of depression and disappointment and sadness? And it was in that moment that I chose to live. I told myself, let's live and let's live passionately. And instantly the depression broke off of me. Now, I know that doesn't happen for a lot of people, but that's what happened for me for the depression piece. But what I had moving forward was the disappointment that kept showing up in my life.
Hmm.
And that disappointment piece, God pointed it out to me when I went to a retreat in my 20s, but it happened again this year. So when you talk about when did you wake up? Just now, earlier, probably a month ago, because here I am now. I'm like, okay, well, I can't trust what people are saying because clearly didn't work out. Can't trust what life says. Life said to do it this way. It still doesn't work out. Let me trust what God says. And this year, I did everything that God told me to do. And it still didn't work out.
Hmm.
I still found myself stressed, frustrated, not hitting the goals I wanted, dissatisfied, and displeased. And I just, in that moment, had to ask myself, what are we doing here? Because I'm looking for something that is not showing up for me. And I had to choose to let go of everything that I believed. I had to choose to let go of if you work hard, you're not going to get what you want. So I then needed to get a new belief, but didn't know how to get a new belief. So one thing I was doing was I just kept praying. I kept praying and asking for healing. I kept praying and asking God, like, what should I believe? And that new belief came 2 days ago. I remember it was 5 o'clock in the morning. I was just in my thoughts trying to calm myself, and I can hear God say again, believe, for I am God. And at that moment, I can feel like the entire ground shift under me. And it was this really hard foundation or mount, I like to think, like a baseball mount. I can feel that under my feet. I can still feel it now. And now some people are listening, like, what do you mean? You're not really standing on that. But it was just this energy that I can feel under my feet, that this is the thing that I need to believe in. Now, do I know what it means? No, because we're still at the very beginning stages, but it lets me know not to put trust in my work. Don't put trust in what life says. Don't put trust in other people and them saying that they're going to come through for you, because they may not, right? So instead, just really trusting that God is who he said he is. And in that moment, I could have a flood of memories from scripture where God parted the Red Sea, where he parted the Jordan, like all these different things. He came through for Joseph. He came through for David. That's what I could stand on.
Mhm.
So that's the new belief that I have now. But later on, if we talk again, I'll let you know more.
Well, but there's actually a couple of things here that you mentioned. They're really, really key. Absolute key on this. One is a mental flip from, and I'm going to say this out loud. It was a mental flip from being a victim to what I would classify as being a hero, and knowing now, okay, I actually have a choice to decide how I'm going to
Mhm.
embrace my attitude. And it's not just a way of life that I have to accept blindly and be depressed and anxious. And that is a mental decision that you have to shift. Second thing, though, that I noticed when you're talking about is this non-isolation. Now, I know that's a negative aspect on a negative word, but the positive is being in the community and being able to actually talk with others, because quite frankly, I think that's one of the biggest traps that we enter into. And especially when it comes to depression or anxiety, is that we often don't share about that with anybody else. And we don't, one obviously is we choose to live in that, but then the second part of that is we choose not to share that we're living in that, because it's like, well, that's not comfortable for
Mhm.
people to share, right? So that ability to be able to actually communicate that. And then the last thing, and this is maybe where we'll kind of transition into some of the other things, is this aspect of you had to set a pattern or habit in your life in order to be able to reset, if
Mhm.
that makes sense. Because the ability for you to be able to say, okay, I don't know what the heck is going on. I'm frustrated. I'm anxious. I'm depressed. I've got like all these things going on. You have to have something that would allow you to press that reset button to be able to say, okay, now I'm going to choose to believe something. How do you do that? Because I think too often we wouldn't even, okay, we talk on this podcast all the time about, okay, this was my belief, and then now I believe this, and then these are the habits and things but we don't talk about that reset button, or that ability to be able to take stock of where we are currently at,
Mhm.
and how do we reset? What do we have to put in our life to wake up, for lack of a better word? How do we now analyze what's going on internally? What do you do to be able to recognize that and then be able to reset?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And honestly, this is a healing question. I know a lot of people want to know what it is. When it comes to healing, it really is admitting what you're going through. The hard part about admitting what you're going through is not having the language for the emotions that are coming up. And so for me, I'm always looking for the language for the emotions that are popping up for me. There is this emotion wheel that you can just Google, like just Google emotions, and it will show you lots of different emotions, and you can pinpoint, this is how I'm feeling. I also am very big on defining the words. I'm not going to assume that this is what depressed means. I'm not going to assume that this is what disappointment means, because the world says one thing, but the definition is actually the foundation. So defining it to make sure this is exactly how I'm feeling. The reason why I do this is because I need to accept that this is how I'm feeling. If I keep resisting it, I'm not going to get free from it. Sometimes we resist it because it hurts too much. Sometimes we resist it because there's a lot of shame there. But in that moment, I have to choose between, do I want to be free or do I want to keep being bound? Right. So that's where I start. The next thing I shared, everyone knows now, I'm a Christian. So there's a lot of prayer. There's a lot of prayer and a lot of crying. I'm okay to cry. I cried every day in 2020. I probably cried every day in 2024. But that's also what lets me know that there's something troubling my soul, right? Or another way of looking at it is like, these are the healing waters flowing because I've been holding on to this for so long. And sometimes I don't even know what this is, but I have to release it. Being able to journal so that I can sort through my emotions and my thoughts. The other thing is, when you're on your healing journey, there may be many things that are popping up. I don't try to address all of them at once. That's
Yeah.
going to be too confusing. So one at a time. So right now it's this disappointment. A couple months ago was fear, right? So it's like one at a time. Let me just focus on this one at a time. And then I have to identify what the belief is. So that's why I was able to speak it clearly to you just now, because I identified, oh, it started here, it was reinforced here, and then it got reinforced again here. But the hardest part is letting go of the belief, because
Okay.
what you believe is what you're standing on. And if you have nothing to stand on, you feel unstable. So now I have to choose to let go of this belief. And there are different ways you can let go of it. But for me to let go of this belief, I had to cry it out a lots and lots of tears. And I had to pretty much denounce it. Like, this is not my life. This is not what's happening to me. Right. And then for maybe about a week, I had no belief. For this particular situation, I had no belief. I was very unstable. People would ask me questions and I would just look at them like, because I understand that sometimes it takes time to bring on a new belief, right? I'm not trying to rush my process at all. Sometimes we try to rush it because we don't like the discomfort. But I've been in this space several times where I've had no belief, and I'm okay with that. I will just keep going through life, and I just wait patiently. And now the new belief comes in the form of someone talking to me, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that makes so much sense. Or God speaking to me, whether it's a whisper in my ear or I'm reading scripture and my heart leaps, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense. I'm relating to it, right? Or I'm reading a book and the same thing happens. So in this particular situation, it was all three.
Mm.
God sent you when you said to me, you can't control the outcome. And notice, like, in each one of these situations, I wanted to control the outcome because I didn't want to go through the pain of waiting again and not receiving what I want. So that was the first step in letting go of the belief, because I'm thinking, if I follow these steps, I'll be able to get this. But if you can't control the outcome, then that means I could follow the steps. It may happen, it may not happen. So then what else am I going to believe in?
Mm.
Another thing, God sent someone else to speak to me, and I started to hold on to that. And then 5 o'clock in the morning, 2 days ago, is when God actually spoke. And I know I keep saying God spoke, right? And I like to share the different ways that He speaks. But in this season, it really is a whisper, my heart thumping just a little bit, and this realization of like, yeah, this is it right here. Sometimes there's a knowing that no, that voice wasn't mine.
Mm.
And that's how I felt in this season. That's how I was able to let go of the belief, heal. I'm still healing, but
Right.
accepting the belief.
Yeah, and I think all those things are good, and we defined it out. Just the fact that admitting, I think, starts with so much of admitting that, hey, something's not quite right here, and something's not. We do that when we're not feeling well, and
Yeah.
we very freely, like, hey, I'm feeling sick today, or my
Mhm.
stomach's upset, or I have a headache, or whatever. We're very willing to express that, but yet when our emotional base is not, we don't want to talk about that part of it.
Yep.
There's something that I feel like I definitely need to bring this up. John Elridge actually is the first one that I talked with, or actually read a book, and the ability for him to express. He's very, very talented, but he expressed our lives as seasons and chapters and
Yeah.
pages in a book.
Yeah.
And so often we don't want to turn that page. We don't want to get rid of that chapter because there was something dear, and it could be good, or it
Mhm.
might be something that was traumatic. It could either or. For me, in my situation, it was the fact that my kids are starting to move out. And so I didn't want to turn the page in the aspect of, I don't want to have this, I don't want to lose what we had. And yet, as I was reading through that, and this is a really, really big foundational aspect, and I think this is what you're expressing, is if we don't, one, allow ourselves to feel some of the pain of loss
Mhm.
or the healing pain of letting go of that trauma, we're never going to be able to get to that next chapter and truly enjoy the benefits and the liberty of that freedom that we can have in that next chapter.
Yeah.
Because
Exactly.
there's so much more out there, so many more experiences, so many more things that we can see. I should say, see, we guess that is coming. We
Yeah.
have that hope, we have that anticipation,
Yeah.
but we don't always express it that way because we're still holding on to that pain of the past or the loss of whatever that was. So as we kind of look into this part now, what are the things that you do moving forward that you're going to put in your life? What are the things that you like, hey, these are my uncompromising I call them habits or actions or values. What are my uncompromising things to be able to write the narrative of your life as you move forward?
That's a good question. Well, one thing, I'm going to practice not controlling the outcome, right? I'm practicing right now. I'm still trying to understand, how do you have hope and expectation even when what you're waiting for doesn't come the way that you expect it to come?
Mm,
Letting go of what the process looks like. I have a idea of what the process looks like. In my mind, it makes sense. It should go this way. Letting that go. Now that's kind of scary, because then it's like, whatever happens, happens, right? And I'm not one of those people who is just like, oh, I'm just gonna wake up and do whatever I want. I'm very structured. I'm disciplined for a reason. But there are some aspects of what I desire to have that I just cannot control the process, right? So instead of trying to control the process, I can control what's going on in me, and making sure that I have peace every day. Really, just whether it's meditating, it's praying, working out definitely helps. Doing all those things to make sure I'm grounded and I have peace every day. And then it's taking time for self care. I realized this year, because of all the stress and the trauma, I was being triggered all year. And
mm.
it had to happen because I needed to be healed, right? So being triggered all year, because of that, I wasn't really taking time for myself to relax and rest. So making sure that I do that. Those are the habits. Self care. I say
Yeah.
all of that to say self care. That's
Yeah, yeah.
exactly what
Well,
it
and I
is.
think that's a multifaceted element, because there's really 5 different areas that you really have to focus on when it comes to self care. But that's for another podcast and a whole nother aspect of things. So you'll have to actually follow us and join, and then you'll hear more about that, I'm sure. So we'll leave that little teaser out there. But the incredible thing is the fact that as we analyze and look at where we've been, recognizing whether it's trauma, pain, or a loss of a season, whatever it ends up being, there's still that transition of a new season, and there is still hope of something that is going to come. And we have that choice of being able to live in that, or we can choose, like you said earlier, to be able to continue in the depression or the anxiety. It's a choice. And I think out of everything, I mean, for me, one of the biggest takeaways with this conversation is that we have the power to be able to choose that one way or the other. And this has just been incredible. All right, so as we kind of wind down, what would be the one thing that you would want somebody to walk away with through this conversation? Like, hey, if you listen to everything else, don't forget this one thing. Or maybe it's something that's on your heart, like, we didn't talk about this, but I need to get it out. What is
Yeah,
that one thing?
that's a good one. It's choose to live, and live passionately. Everything that you choose to do, love it, have passion for it, enjoy it, and understand that joy doesn't mean that you're not going to have sad days. Understand that passion doesn't mean you're not going to have hard days. I think I had a belief, no, I know I had a belief that even though I was joy filled, that sadness wasn't going to come. And that's not true.
Mm,
We're humans, we're going to experience our emotions. Life is going to life. But no matter what happens, choose to live and live passionately.
yeah, it's awesome. Awesome. How can people get in contact with you? You said something that resonates with them. How is the best way to get in touch with you?
Yep, you can go to my website, which is bookofstar.com. So that's the book like you're reading of star.com. And you can follow me on Instagram at Book of Star. Honestly, if you go to any social media platform, just put in Book of Star and I'll pop up.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, well, again, thank you for being with us. Anything else you want to add real quick, or we're ready to close it out, but I give you one last chance. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to say, when you're healing, choose to heal and
Mm,
take your time with yourself. Give yourself grace.
mm.
Sometimes we try to rush through it because it's like, if I could feel better now. But life is really conspiring so that you can heal. So everything that's happening, those triggers are popping up for a reason. Don't ignore them. Take the time to heal.
And I think that's such a huge piece of the puzzle when we're talking about writing the narrative of our lives.
Mhm.
This journey of life is really about a longer trek.
Yeah.
And the fact of saying, hey, it's okay to heal, and it's part of the journey, it's part of your story. There's going to be scars, there's going to be challenges, and sometimes those are physical, sometimes they're emotional, sometimes it's mental. Everybody's story is going to be a little bit different. So until next time, everybody that's listening, make sure you continue to write and craft your narrative, because everybody's narrative is valuable. Everyone is important. And don't forget that you have the choice. I love this. You have the choice to choose to not live in the past and choose to live in the hope of the future.